The K-pop industry has long been shadowed by a phenomenon fans whisper about with a mix of fear and resignation, the 7-year curse. It's a term that has quietly embedded itself into fandom culture, not because of superstition, but because history keeps repeating itself with uncomfortable precision. Over and over again, idol groups reach their 7th year only to face a crossroads where loyalty, ambition, exhaustion, and corporate interests collide. What should be a celebration of longevity often turns into a moment of reckoning, where the future of an entire group hangs in the balance. As 2026 draws closer, that familiar tension is beginning to rise once again. Groups that debuted in 2019 are now approaching the expiration of their original contracts, and with that comes an unavoidable question. Will they survive together or quietly fall apart behind closed doors? For some idols, this stage represents freedom and growth, a chance to renegotiate better terms or continue doing what they love with renewed stability. But for many others, it marks the end of an era they may no longer have the strength or desire to sustain. The roots of this curse run deep. In the late 2000s, the K-pop industry was shaken by revelations of exploitative long-term contracts that heavily favored entertainment companies. Legal battles exposed how idols were trapped in agreements that demanded everything while offering very little in return. Government intervention eventually capped exclusive contracts at 7 years, a move meant to protect artists. Ironically, it also created a pressure point that now defines the most dangerous year in an idol group's lifespan. 7 years in, idols are no longer rookies chasing visibility at any cost. They're veterans who have endured relentless schedules, public scrutiny, physical injuries, and emotional burnout. Individual dreams begin to surface, and not every member wants the same future anymore. When even one person steps away, the fragile balance holding a group together can crack beyond repair. And this time, the warning signs are already there. If you want to understand which groups might be standing on the edge as 2026 approaches, stay with me, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive deeper into the stories unfolding behind the scenes. By the time idol groups reach their 7th year, the pressure is no longer abstract. It becomes deeply personal, shaped by years of sacrifice that fans rarely see. The industry often sells the idea of unity and brotherhood, but behind the polished performances, reality is far more complicated. 7 years is long enough for cracks to form, especially when success is unevenly distributed among members. Popularity gaps widen, solo opportunities emerge, and financial disparities quietly reshape group dynamics. At this stage, idols are forced to confront questions they once postponed. Is continuing as a group still worth the physical toll? Is the company willing to invest in long-term growth? Or are they already shifting focus to newer acts? For many groups, the answer becomes painfully clear through reduced promotions, inconsistent comebacks, and a gradual loss of visibility. What fans perceive as neglect often reflects internal calculations being made behind closed doors. The emotional strain is just as heavy. 7 years of constant scrutiny can erode trust, not only between artists and companies, but among members themselves. Creative disagreements become harder to ignore. Leadership roles shift, sometimes unwillingly. And when a scandal or controversy erupts, even a single incident can permanently alter how a group is perceived, both publicly and internally. Recovery is rarely clean, and time does not always heal the damage. History has shown that survival at this point requires absolute alignment. Every member must be willing to renew, recommit, and endure another full contract cycle together. That level of unity is rare, especially when individual careers suddenly feel more achievable outside the group structure. As 2026 looms, fans have begun re-examining the trajectories of groups from the 2019 generation, searching for familiar warning signs that have preceded countless disbandments before. And in several cases, those signs are impossible to ignore. For some groups, the 7-year curse doesn't arrive suddenly. It creeps in through moments that fans initially try to rationalize or forgive. A delayed comeback here, a member hiatus there, and eventually a scandal that shifts everything. What once felt like temporary turbulence starts to look more like a pattern of instability. At that point, survival is no longer about talent or dedication, but about whether the structure around the group is strong enough to withstand repeated shocks. Groups that debuted with promise often find themselves struggling to maintain relevance once their early momentum fades. A single controversy can accelerate that decline, especially when it involves leadership figures or members central to the group's identity. When a leader exits under difficult circumstances, the loss is rarely limited to lineup changes. It disrupts creative direction, emotional cohesion, and fan trust all at once. Companies may push forward quickly, insisting on continuity, but fans can sense when something fundamental has shifted. As years pass, Inconsistent releases begin to take their toll. Some comebacks resonate, others vanish without impact, creating an uneven narrative that's difficult to sustain. In an industry driven by constant visibility, losing momentum is often more damaging than outright failure. Fans start questioning management decisions, from poorly organized anniversaries to underwhelming promotions, even if nothing is ever officially acknowledged. These doubts grow louder as the 7th year approaches. The conversation changes from whether the group still has potential to whether the environment around them allows that potential to survive. Once that question enters public discourse, it rarely disappears. For many groups approaching 2026, the issue is no longer about passion or effort, but whether the foundations beneath them have already begun to crumble. While some groups struggle with scandals and fading momentum, others face a different kind of danger: identity erosion. In K-pop, consistency is everything, especially for mid-tier groups that rely on recognition rather than dominance. When a group's name, lineup, or concept changes too drastically in a short period of time, the damage can be subtle but devastating. Fans begin to feel disconnected, and casual listeners struggle to understand who the group even is anymore. Rebrands are often framed as fresh starts, but they come at a cost. A name change forces audiences to recalibrate their emotional attachment, while lineup overhauls can fracture the sense of continuity that keeps long-term supporters invested. Health-related hiatuses, extended absences, and the sudden addition of new members may be necessary decisions, but when they happen all at once, they destabilize the core of the group. What remains can feel unfamiliar, even to those who once felt closest to it. For newer fans, the lack of a clear entry point becomes a barrier. For older fans, the feeling that the group they supported no longer exists can lead to quiet disengagement. Promotions continue, music is released, schedules are maintained, yet the impact is minimal. Visibility doesn't translate into growth, and effort doesn't lead to expansion. This is one of the most dangerous positions a group can be in as they approach contract renewal. Without a strong, unified identity, negotiating another full contract cycle becomes risky. Companies hesitate to invest further, and idols are left questioning whether continuing together makes sense. As 2026 approaches, groups facing this kind of instability find themselves especially vulnerable, with disbandment rumors growing louder not because of one dramatic event, but because the foundation itself feels fragile. As the 7th year approaches, uncertainty becomes the one constant that binds these groups together. Even those that appear stable on the surface are not immune to the silent pressures building behind the scenes. Contract renewals are never just about paperwork. They force idols to confront years of accumulated fatigue, unresolved frustration, and unanswered questions about their future. At this stage, staying together requires more than loyalty. It demands belief that the system surrounding them is still worth trusting. For some groups, consistent releases have not translated into meaningful growth. Despite regular comebacks and polished performances, they find themselves overshadowed in an industry that grows more saturated every year. When management decisions feel directionless and communication breaks down, even dedicated fan bases begin to lose confidence. Trust, once fractured, is difficult to rebuild, especially when explanations are vague or entirely absent. In other cases, the damage comes from prolonged silence. Long gaps without music, minimal updates, and unclear plans create a vacuum filled by speculation. Fans are left guessing whether inactivity is strategic, financial, or simply a sign that the company has already moved on. By the time official statements arrive, the emotional distance may already be too wide to close. Without visibility, even established names struggle to remain relevant, and the idea of a full-scale revival begins to feel increasingly unrealistic. What makes the 7-year curse so devastating is that it rarely ends with a dramatic announcement. More often, it unfolds quietly through stalled negotiations, members choosing different paths, or groups continuing in name only. Survival is not just about avoiding disbandment, but about whether a group can move forward with purpose, unity, and support strong enough to sustain another chapter. As 2026 draws closer, these groups stand at a decisive moment. Some may defy expectations and emerge stronger. Others may fade into K-pop history as yet another reminder of how unforgiving the industry can be. If you want to keep uncovering the real stories behind K-pop's biggest turning points, make sure to subscribe, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for the next deep dive. The next chapter is always closer than it seems.